September 20th, 1974. President Derek C. Bach, Harvard University, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Dear President Bach, my name is Ellen Foster. I hope this finds you happy, in good health, and thriving in picturesque New England. It is not quite as scenic here in my part of North Carolina, also known as Variety Vacation Land, but this is because I live in the flat, blank section between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Smoky Mountains, which team up to account for the variety. One of my mottos is that nothing you think, feel, or do should be watered down. So when I decided to try out for college, Harvard sounded like the only place to be. The main reason I'm returning my information to you instead of the correct office is because there happen to be some things off the average about me, and I needed to make sure you know their reality. Wanting to start Harvard at only 15 could seem like a tale, for example, but it's true, and I believe it makes sound sense because of all the surplus living that was jammed into the years. My childhood was the kind that saturates you with quick ambition to think through and begin the next episode of your life. Although I've been trying to seize each day and appreciate it more as is, a compare and contrast would be trying to break the trend of picking through oranges and handling them until you believe you've finally come across the perfect example to taste. Those years also made me into an individual who wouldn't be disdone by the large experience of leaving my road to go learn amid 10,000 or so older strangers. Not to say anything is currently the matter. Everything has definitely been on the up and up. But even if I was trying to escape pressing hardship at home or a checkered reputation at school, I wouldn't select Harvard to go on the lam. A person who graduated from there was supposed to grade how close I come to being Harvard material. And I need to let you know I went to town to meet the man we have. But when I got to his nursing home, I found him unaware. He'd had another stroke the day before and is now locked in a state of deep coma. But if another one crops up before the deadline, I'll get them to create an opinion and send it to you immediately. The bookmobile librarian who told me about the man is keeping her eyes peeled. But for now, I'd appreciate it if you could please allow this letter to count toward the missing point of view. If the man had been able to ask why I felt motivated toward Harvard, I would have said, I want to be exposed to harder teachers who have strict yet interesting requirements and a student body that thrives on curiosity. It'd be fascinating to be in a lunchroom with people sharing information about simple miracles, such as the smallpox and hookworm vaccinations. Or having someone speak up and tell about a family vacation to Crete. In fact, my goal is to study both English and medicine and then enter the field of epidemic disease research. I see myself going into the wilds of places like Bali or Tahiti to research folk customs of medical cures and deliver vaccines, as well as lessons on both nutrition and poetry. To reach this ideal, what I believe I need to do now is go ahead and enter a future where people share a love of living more in the mind and see a value in studying things that never sound required for survival on the surface, such as how Socrates talked with his philosophical pupils. I can only imagine the daily awe of learning while surrounded by marble columns featuring the sayings of Aristotle, Homer, and others, New England fall foliage, and perhaps some flying buttresses. It sounds urgent, but it's only because the best time to leave is almost here. The present situation is, I'm at the threshold of completing 9 years at my rural school and the crossing of the real and symbolic road to enter the high school. I could easily turn toward town and the train station instead, where the map says the train lets out a very walkable sliver of distance from Harvard. Unless a night arrival or books I may need to bring in the baggage make it wiser to flag a taxi for the campus dormitory or female rooming house, depending on what each would be asking. Going on to the brief narration of my background section, I need to let you know not to read mine and think this girl's trying to create a mood of shock and sympathy to gain a free ride or discount. The summary is that my mother became too sad and died when I was 9. And ordinary life got and stayed unusual for the 2 years it took to track down the steady foster situation I still enjoy here. Things in between include moving out of the house due to my father's problems, and then his death due to a sudden head vein explosion the next year. Living with an aunt who didn't have raising another girl in mind, living with my art teacher and then getting moved out of there because of judicial branch confusion, getting assigned to live with my grandmother who soon sickened, lingered, and died, loving school as well as close friends throughout, reading like a fiend, having to move out of another house on Christmas, and walking up the road to the house of girls run by a foster lady, thus my name, Ellen Foster. If I had the job of selecting a well-rounded group of individuals to come to my college, I would worry about an underage orphan with a list of obstacles showing up and being a misfit. But I want to emphasize that I get along well, both at school and at home. My foster mother is not pleased with my educational outlook and has tried to correct it on this end. But the private school here is the academy of the New Dawn Apocalypse. And the school board said forced busing was enough upheaval, so they cannot allow students to bend the rules to skip grades or change schools unless a person needs Braille materials or rails. When I asked her about Harvard, she said she'd seen college careers pan out for several piano and mathematical prodigies on public television, so nothing would be lost by my giving it a try, with only offering more general skills of the mind. I realized that it could not be more expensive, which is why I need to emphasize that I know how to work and don't at all mind it. On a typical morning at Harvard, for example, I could put in a few hours at the cafeteria, working the breakfast tray line, or at the gym handing out baskets, although I have more experience in the library. I've been trained in all areas, from ordering from the State Depository to changing bulletin boards, and worked in there alone for the 3 months of the librarian's knee surgery and malpractice case. And as she is now wheelchair-bound, and so much of the library involves reaching, I catch her up on a range of her daily duties. If you do not have the Dewey Decimal System, I'd quickly adapt to your procedure. There's also the school store and canteen, and I've worked in the concession stand at high school sports games and during a series of wrestling extravaganzas in town and Billy Graham crusade shows. Beside the current weekend jobs in home and church cleaning and magazine sales, I collect and write the school news, which runs each Saturday. It pays next to nothing, although everybody says the savings I can put toward Harvard from the cleaning, the food service, and magazines would pay for an ordinary education if that was what I was after. I enclosed a copy of my column, Ellen's Tellin', to check on the possibility of getting on at the paper up there. One last idea is, although I understand Harvard doesn't have a special education section, I wanted to let you know that I could substitute teach